Hi everyone. Assessment one's over and probably a distant memory for all of you, but I thought it would be a good idea to take some time to give you some overall feedback in an effort to help you with assessment two. Let me just change this. There we go. So you did a great job, and I know that for many of you this was the very first assignment you've done in a really long time. I've given you two types of feedback on your essays. The first is in-text comments. So they're the ones that come up with a little speech bubble that are written on top of your essay, where I've highlighted things you've done well or areas for improvement. The second side of it is the general comment. So that's the text comment. And that's some information about what you've done well, areas you can improve, and sometimes some links to things, as well as your final grade. Make sure that you read both of those. If there's anything that doesn't make any sense, then please just let me know. I'm happy to give you extra feedback on that. So let's have a bit of a look at what we all did well and what we still need to think about. So these are the things you did well. So the essays had a really good structure: information, introduction, body paragraph, conclusion. You generally had one idea per paragraph, and your ideas progressed and developed throughout the essay. You did a great job of using third person, which meant avoiding the use of I and we, and the language was generally formal, so it wasn't chatty, and people managed to stay away from just giving personal opinion, which was great. The four language components were described. Some of you put in definitions, which was great, and examples. The examples are really important. They really help to illustrate the points so that the reader can understand. People had reference lists, which was great. Most of you remembered to start that on a new page. They were organised alphabetically. And you also managed to incorporate research, generally using the learning materials, which was also done well. Okay, so I mentioned that there were two types of comments. If you aren't sure how to access this, I've actually posted a document on our discussion board under important announcements, so you can see the graphic here. So under important announcements, and in this thread here, how to access your assessment comments. So just a word about originality reports and scores. Turnitin allows me to give you really detailed feedback on what you've been doing. It also allows you to submit and check your work by giving you an originality report. I've put a link down here which will take you to some information about how to understand and use your originality report. That's really worth exploring. When it comes to the score that you get for that, we don't have a magic number that you need to be under or over. It's possible to have a really high score because you're still learning to reference, or to have a very low score and for it to be plagiarism. So we don't have a magic number, but being able to check that originality report will help you to work out what you need to do. Okay, here we go. So referencing and in-text citations, you did a great job with many elements of referencing and in-text citations. In fact, I was really impressed with how well you did with that, because it's a really tricky skill. So these are just a couple of reminders here. So if it's a quote, you need to make sure you use quotation marks, and that's at the beginning and the end. And then after the quote, you will have in brackets the author, the year, and the page number. And then I find that the minute I put one in, I add that source straight to my reference list, then I make sure I don't forget any of them. With paraphrasing and summarising, you need to have the author and the year after the sentence or the part that you're paraphrasing, and then add that source to your reference list also. Again, a couple more reminders here about referencing. I've got this also on the discussion board. If you go to our help forum in the APA referencing strand, there's a fantastic referencing cheat sheet. that's definitely worth downloading and keeping next to you. It has a bit of text and actually shows you what it should look like, so it's definitely worth a look. And there's also a link at the bottom here to the Swinburne APA Style Guide, which when I'm ever in doubt, that's the first place I go. Many of you were wanting to cite secondary sources. That is, you'd read about a researcher in Fellows and Oakley or in the Burke reading or something else that you'd read, but you hadn't actually read that researcher's book. So let's have a bit of an example here about what you do. So it says here, in this example, Grimm and Alter quote another researcher called Poppet. You only read about Poppet in Grimm and Alter's book, but you haven't read Poppet's book. So you have to show that as an in-text reference. So you don't include Poppet in your end reference because you never read his book. You only include the source that you got that information from. So that would be Grimm and Alter. And in the text, you would write Poppet, 2008, because he's the person who said it, show that young children should not be left near open fires. And then that at the end of the sentence, you would say, as cited in Grimm and Alter. And because there's a quote in there, you've got a page number. Just a word about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is tricky. Quite a few of you fell into the trap of just changing a few words in a sentence from an original source rather than paraphrasing, and that resulted in high originality scores. And in actual fact, just changing a few words is actually a form of plagiarism. I haven't penalised anybody for doing that. I've chosen this time around to point it out to you in case you weren't aware of that. But it's definitely something you need to be aware of in the future. So my suggestion is that when you've read something, if it's something that you want to use, close the text, maybe even walk away, have a coffee, and then come back and jot down in note form the gist of what was said and then put it back into sentences. So I've found a couple of examples here of what a paraphrase might look like. So the first one here says, giraffes like acacia leaves and hay and they consume 75 pounds of food a day. So the important words there are giraffe, the 75 pounds and what they eat, and that they do it every day. So the rephrase might be, a giraffe can eat up to 75 pounds of acacia leaves and hay every day. You're effectively saying exactly the same thing, but you have completely reconstructed the sentence and you've moved things around. Another example, any trip to Italy should include a visit to Tuscany to sample their exquisite wines. So, and the paraphrase there is, be sure to include Tuscan wine tasting experience when visiting Italy. So you've got all the same information, it's just in a different form. I'm going to be posting on the discussion board a great YouTube clip that I found where somebody's actually taking you through how you would go about paraphrasing, and I really suggest everybody has a look at that. You did a great job of including theory in your essays, but I just wanted to have a couple of clarifications. So first of all, you've got people, theorists, so Piaget, Vygotsky, Skinner and Bruner, and a few others. And the theorists are responsible for coming up with a theory. So for instance, it might be that language acquisition is influenced by something. So theorists come up with theories, and a theoretical perspective is about how that theory is developed. So many of you wanted to talk about Piaget and Vygotsky, who are both theorists, but got a bit sidetracked by using their names and then forgot to actually connect them to their theoretical perspectives. So in this essay, remember, it was asking about theoretical perspectives. So while it's absolutely okay to talk about Vygotsky, you actually needed to talk about the theoretical perspective that was attached to him. So the example here is, for example, Vygotsky believed that the theory of language acquisition was both social and biological in nature. So that's his theory, and that's encompassed in the social interactionist theory, because they believe children are born with biological capability to learn and acquire language, and these skills are developed through scaffolding from adults. So that's the theoretical perspective. Okay, definitions was a big one that people struggled with in this one. Many people wrote this essay as if they were writing the essay for me, who would know what words like behaviourist theory and phonology would mean. When you're writing academically, you need to assume that your reader is intelligent, but actually might not have much knowledge on the subject. Just like when you started out, if Fellows and Oakley hadn't defined key terms for you, you wouldn't have been able to understand what you were reading. So you need to do the same for your reader, whether that is in the essay, whether it's the presentation that you're going to be giving. You're going to have people in your audience, whether it's reading or listening, who are intelligent. They can understand if you give them a definition, but they need those definitions to be able to fully understand what you're saying. So key terms this time around that needed to be defined were language and language components. So phonology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, nature and nurture needed to be, and whatever theoretical perspectives it was that you chose. Your audience for assessment 2 is going to be a board of committees. So often board of committees are made up of very intelligent people, but not necessarily teachers. They're made up of parents and people from business communities and things like that. So they're not necessarily going to understand. So definitions is going to be a really important one for assessment 2 also. Okay, using the learning materials. This is really important. It's important that you start with the learning materials each week. When you're doing your assessments, base your assessments on the key readings, and it's very hard to go wrong. You can use your wider reading, and it's fantastic if you're doing wider reading to add to your essay, but don't use them as the basis of your assessment. That's the fastest way to go off on a tangent and then accidentally not answer the question. So the key readings are there to help keep you on track, and use your wider reading to supplement it. Okay, reading the rubric. Can't stress enough how important it is to look at the rubric for each assessment. The rubric is us effectively telling you exactly what we're looking for. So this is your checklist prior to submission. If you've missed even one tiny element that's required in the rubric, say for instance you forgot to talk about pragmatics, even if you have mentioned everything else that you needed, you actually haven't fully answered the question and we can't pass you. So you need to really look closely at these rubrics and check off, did I mention phonological, did I mention syntactic, did I mention semantics? So actually go through, have I got a reference list? Use it as a checklist before you submit anything. Okay. Moving on to assessment 2, we've got the Collaborate coming up on Sunday the 28th of August at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's the Sunday of Consolidation Week. Write it, I've put here, write it in your diary, change your work schedule if you can, tell your parents you can't come for family dinner, record your favourite show. Being at this session is going to, your stress levels will be lower, and you will be grateful that you went. It is recorded, so if you really can't make it, just be sure to watch the session afterwards. And if you can make it, it's a great resource to be able to go back and go, now what did they say about that? And of course, after any Collaborate, if you still have questions, please let me know. As always, I'm here to help. Post your questions on the board in the Assessment 2 thread. It's a great idea to put them there because chances are other people are probably wondering exactly the same thing. Alternately, you can email me. Thanks for your time. I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see you at the Collaborate. Bye everyone.